All right, let's get into it. We're about to do a deep dive into one of the most intense and honestly provocative works you might ever come across. It's called The Legacy Document. And that subtitle, A Unified Field Theory of Thievery, well, that's just the tip of the iceberg. This thing makes claims about history, about science, about biology that are designed to challenge pretty much everything you think you know. It's presented not as a theory, but as a record, a restoration of what it calls stolen knowledge, and a pretty urgent call to action. So, buckle up.
Right from the jump, the authors make one thing crystal clear. This isn't a complaint, it's not a grievance. They want you to know this is not about asking for sympathy or recognition. They're presenting this as a case file, a meticulously documented record of a crime that spans millennia. That framing is everything. It's basically asking you to put on your detective hat and just look at the evidence they're about to lay out.
And here it is, the central thesis, the bombshell claim of the entire work. The document argues that all these things we see as separate historical events, military conquests, the founding of major religions, colonialism, even modern scientific breakthroughs, they're not separate at all. They're all connected, all moves in one single 5,000-year-long strategy, a unified field theory of thievery. It's a colossal claim. So let's see how they even begin to build that case.
Okay, so to understand the crime, you've got to understand the scene of the crime. And according to this document, the story doesn't start in a place called Africa. It starts in a place they call by its original name, Alkebulan.
The argument here is that Alkebulan is the true mother of mankind. Their entire theory is anchored right here, specifically in the civilization of Kemet, what most of us know as ancient Egypt. They argue this wasn't just a civilization, it was the source code for all human civilization. Science, spirituality, medicine, you name it, it all started here. Everything that follows in their theory flows from this single origin point.
Now, you really need to lock in on this because this is a foundational claim that supports the entire document. The authors point to genetic evidence tracing all of us back to a single African ancestor and say, look, melanated peoples are not just one branch on the tree of humanity, they are the trunk. All other populations, they argue, are branches that grew from that trunk. And if that's true, it means their history and their science aren't some side story, it is the central story of humanity.
Okay, so if Kemet was this incredible powerhouse of civilization, what was fueling it? What was the secret sauce behind all their advanced knowledge? To answer that, the document shifts gears from history to biophysics, and it points to one single biological element that it claims has been deliberately scrubbed from mainstream science.
And that element is what the document calls activated melanin. This concept is the key that unlocks their entire theory. Forget everything you think you know about melanin just being skin pigment. They define it as a highly advanced quantum biological system, a biological superconductor, basically, that processes light, sound, and electromagnetic energy. Think of it as the physical hardware that connects human consciousness to the universe itself. And according to them, learning how to activate this system, that was the secret to Kemet's power.
So now we get to the core metaphor for this 5,000-year operation. The document argues this wasn't just a series of random smash and grabs. It was a single entity, a single agenda, that just adapted and changed its appearance over time. And they call it the serpent and its skins. This quote just lays out the concept perfectly. The idea is that the underlying goal, the theft and suppression of this original knowledge in biology, it never changes. The only thing that changes is the method, the institution, the skin. When one form of control gets old or stops working, the serpent just sheds that skin and grows a new one. And here they are, the 7 skins laid out on a timeline. First, military conquest and the destruction of knowledge itself. Then, the fabrication of new religions from what they call stolen theology. After that, colonial enslavement. That skin gets shed for legal segregation, things like Jim Crow laws. Then comes structural racism, then cultural appropriation, and finally, the serpent's current and most sneaky form, epistemological theft. We'll get into that, but it's basically the theft of knowledge happening right inside our scientific institutions.
Let's look at that first skin. They use a very specific word for it, epistemicide. It means the killing of a knowledge system. The argument is that when conquerors came to Kemet, they didn't just loot gold, they looted the libraries. They copied the science, the philosophy, the medicine. And then, by destroying the original sources, think about the Library of Alexandria. They could turn around and present that stolen knowledge as their own. It's a simple strategy: steal it, rebrand it, and then destroy the original receipt.
And get this is fascinating. The document uses the history of a single word as a piece of evidence. It argues that our modern word chemistry has a direct, traceable lineage all the way back to Kemet, which means the Black Land. Just follow the breadcrumbs from Kemet to the Greek chemia, to the Arabic alchemia, to European alchemy, and boom, finally to chemistry. The authors say this isn't just a linguistic coincidence, it's a paper trail mapping out how the knowledge was transferred and how the origin was erased every step of the way.
They apply this exact same logic to religion, which they call the second skin. They put the Kemetic 42 Declarations of Innocence right next to the Ten Commandments. The argument they're making is that this foundational moral code of Abrahamic faiths wasn't some unique divine revelation, but a shortened, repackaged version of a much older and more detailed Kemetic philosophy, with the source, once again, completely erased.
But what's the end game here? Why go through all of this trouble for 5,000 years? According to the document, stealing knowledge was just step one. The real target wasn't the libraries or the temples. It was human biology.
And this leads us to the third skin, and maybe the most radical claim in the entire document. It completely reframes the system of slavery. The argument is that slavery was not primarily about free labor. They call it a biological weapons program, intentionally designed to attack and shut down the function of the melanin system. Every single condition, the dehydration, the constant stress, the malnutrition, being kept out of the sun, was a weapon, a lever to biologically deactivate a people.
And the document argues these mechanisms of suppression aren't just history, they're still active today. They move beyond the plantation and point to modern factors, environmental toxins, specifically calling out things like fluoride in our water, which they claim calcifies the pineal gland. They point to psychological warfare in media and a miseducation system in our schools. The core claim is that these aren't just social problems, they are intentional tools of biological warfare, still in effect.
And this is how they connect the dots directly from the past to the present. They argue that modern institutions, especially our public education system, are just a continuation of this attack. The goal, they claim, isn't to expand consciousness, it's to produce compliance. By teaching a history that erases the true origin story and training our minds in a purely materialistic way, these systems are effectively short-circuiting our biological potential.
So what's the point of all this? According to the authors, the ultimate strategic goal is simple. A people whose biological system is suppressed, whose connection to what they call their quantum potential is severed, well, they can't mount an effective resistance. They are far easier to control, to exploit for labor, and to keep in a state of psychological and spiritual dependency. Stealing the knowledge was just the first step to stealing sovereignty.
All of this builds up to what the document calls the serpent's final and most sophisticated skin. The theft moves out of ancient history and walks right into the modern quantum physics lab.
Okay, the argument here is absolutely mind-bending. The authors claim that when modern physicists talk about things like non-destructive charge collapse or quantum coherence, they are, without even knowing it, describing the exact scientific principles that were being practiced in Kemet thousands of years ago. It's the same science, they say, but with one critical variable that has been systematically erased from the equation. This chart from the document lays out the parallels they're drawing. They claim the Kemetic concept of Ma'at, which is all about cosmic order and balance, is the literal definition of non-destructive charge collapse, a core principle of energy efficiency. They argue that Kem, the black, fertile soil of the Nile, was the original prima materia the alchemists were searching for. And most importantly, that the legendary philosopher's stone was never some magical rock. It was a biological state, a state achieved through an activated melanin system.
And this quote just nails their entire position on this final theft. The crucial omission, the thing that was erased, is melanin. The authors argue that modern science is busy describing the effects of this quantum biological system without ever naming the system itself, or the people in whom it's most concentrated. Their whole mission, they say, is to restore the people, the biology, to the science from which they were erased.
Now, the document doesn't just leave you with the problem. After detailing 5,000 years of theft, the entire second half is dedicated to the solution. It's a full-on blueprint for restoration. The ultimate goal of this whole restoration project is a concept they call biological sovereignty. And the argument is simple, but it's profound. You can't have real political or economic freedom until you reclaim control of your own biology. If your biological hardware is being suppressed, then all other efforts to build power are happening on a shaky foundation. So step one has to be restoring control over the melanin system. So what does this restoration actually look like in the real world?
The document doesn't try to reinvent the wheel. It heavily points to the work of the psychologist and author Dr. Amos Wilson, specifically his book Blueprint for Black Power, and holds it up as the most practical and rigorous framework for rebuilding a civilization.
Wilson's blueprint is built on 5 huge pillars. First, economics, achieving total economic self-sufficiency. Second, education, building your own independent institutions to teach the true history and science. Third, politics, creating a unified political organization. Fourth, media, establishing your own media complex to own and control the narrative. And finally, number 5, culture, a deep restoration of traditional values and practices.
And this is where it all clicks together. This is the masterstroke of the document. It connects its biophysical research directly to Wilson's sociopolitical plan. It argues that only a people who are biologically sovereign, with fully activated melanin systems, will have the mental clarity, the physical energy, and the collective focus to actually build these 5 pillars. The biophysics is the fuel for the engine of reconstruction.
And this brings us right to the document's final charge to the reader. It's not a call to protest, it's a call to activation. They say, activate your melanin system, learn the science, practice the protocols, teach your children, build the communities. It is a direct, urgent call to action that's all about personal and collective responsibility. This final phrase echoes through the entire work. It's like their closing argument, repeated over and over. It's a declaration of completion. The authors are essentially saying, we did our part. We documented the crime, we laid out the science for restoration. The record is now set in stone. The truth is what it is, whether people accept it or not. And based on that record and that truth, the sovereign individual and the sovereign community can and must stand.
In the end, the legacy document isn't just a history lesson. It presents itself as a key that unlocks a hidden history and a suppressed science. And after laying out this epic 5,000-year record, its final message isn't about the past at all. It's about the future. It leaves you, the reader, the viewer, with one massive question. Now that you've been given the key, what are you going to build?